Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Football Manager 2024 series, Help Me Play Chelsea. And it's been a few weeks in game time since our last episode, but not very much has happened on the pitch. We were eliminated from the FA Cup very early this year, so there's been some FA Cup action and some international action. But there's only been one Premier League game since our last game, and we won 1-0 against Luton Town. Not a big surprise there, as they are one of the lower ranked teams. It was tied until very late. Conor Gallagher finally scored for us in the 86th minute. So fortunate to get out with 3 points there. We were reasonably dominant in terms of our opportunities and our possession, but just didn't really end up adding up to goals. But we got the one that we needed, which was positive. And we've spent most of this past month just investigating and trying to get more active in the transfer market. And unfortunately, we haven't really been able to get anything material done. We've got 6.4 million in our transfer budget. So what we've typically been doing is looking for players who are kind of looking for, or not looking, but players who we think are valued in the 12, 15, 18, maybe $20 million range, trying to use up all of our transfer budget now, along with some pretty significant potential payments to teams in the future. But that certainly limited the caliber of player we can go after. In retrospect, in our past episode, we talked about Rabiot, who was available on a free and should have probably been more aggressive going after him in retrospect. I know some of you gave me some suggestions on how to maybe have structured the contract better and not necessarily eliminated as many of the different items as he was looking for from negotiation, and probably should have been willing to pay him a little more, because he ended up quickly after our discussions with him ended. He re-signed with Juventus, and he was really kind of the only guy potentially available on a free that was interesting to a team like Chelsea as far as what I thought that we needed. So I probably should not have been so aggressive taking out some of those clauses, and given that I took out those clauses, probably should certainly have been more willing to give a bit as far as his salary. So lesson learned. Hopefully there will be some other opportunities in the future. As I mentioned, nothing really brewing all that actively with the transfer budget that we do have available. I'll show a couple of the players that we've tried to engage with their teams, and in some cases made offers to the players on. But in every case, either our initial approach and or the amount of money that we offered in transfer was rejected by the team, or on the couple of occasions when a transfer offer was actually accepted, the player either didn't want to come, said he was happy where he was, and or we couldn't get an agreement done with the player. And one player that I tried for a few times was Yasser Asprilla, a 20-year-old out of Colombia who's with Watford. We have made offers with him. He seems to want to leave, but we're never able to get a agreement with Watford as far as the transfer conditions. I think the fact that any offer we were going to be able to make was going to be backloaded didn't help in our negotiation. Our scouts felt he would be a terrific signing for the future, and you kind of look at his potential upside, and he could certainly be an interesting player. Thought that bringing him on board at 20 years old for 15, 20, 25 million total might have been something that could have made sense for us. But unfortunately, the attacking midfielder will not be ours, at least this time around. I think that the fact that we were kind of limited in the amount of money we had right now was a significant issue. We did go to the board and ask for more money to try to get this transfer to go through, and they told us thanks but no thanks in no uncertain terms. But I thought that at his age and with his potential ability to play a number of positions on the forward side of the pitch, that he could be an interesting prospect to try to get some playing time and build around. But it is not to be the case. Couple more recently transactions that we tried to complete in the transfer market. Tried to go for Vanderson, the Brazilian defender and wingback, 22 years old, pretty solid physical skills. Thought that he could be a potentially interesting defenseman for us to build around going forward, but no interest in selling him. We also checked in on a couple of younger goalies, given that I think upgrading our goalkeeper position is something we want to think about. Not so much for this year at this point, since there's not too much we can do with the remainder of this season, but bringing in someone who's a little more talented among young goalies. We reached out on Dennis Saman and were rejected there. And then also for a bit more experienced goaltender, Lucas Chevalier from the French League, and were also rejected there. Barcelona is willing to talk about Chadi Riyad, but we thought his transfer value was more in the $15 to $20 million range, and they're asking for $34 million for him right now. 20 years old, decent physical skills. Think that he could ultimately be a pretty interesting center defender for us, but I don't know that he is a $34 million player. And I also don't think with a $6.5 million transfer budget right now that anything we gave them that was severely back-weighted would be viewed as attractive to Barcelona. I mentioned I've also, within the last couple of weeks, interacted with the board, and they've told me, as I said, in no uncertain terms, that we're not getting any more money for transfers, so not going to even bother doing that at this point. And one player that we could afford and that we did have a transfer offer accepted on was Claudio Echeverri, the young Argentinian. I don't think he's as high potential as some of the other prospects that I've talked about, but taking a look at his scouting report, if he meets what we think might be his full potential, he would still be a pretty interesting player to bring into our organization. Unfortunately, even though the transfer bid was accepted, or the transfer offer was accepted, he said he was not interested in entering negotiations with us. So we've had other scenarios similar to the ones that I've outlined with other players. We also made some offers for Marcos Leonardo that were rejected. It seems like the offers that his team is accepting are not as backloaded as the type of offers that we're kind of forced to make at this point, with only $6.5 million of transfer money to use at this point. But certainly think he would have been a potentially extremely interesting striker to bring into our organization. And unfortunately, it looks like he's probably going to end up with Man United. So we're going to miss out on him, and he's going to end up at a team that we are likely chasing in the standings, because as you can see here from the Premier League table, Man United is actually a point behind us at this point, but we've got a road game coming up with them at the beginning of February, and haven't been particularly strong on the road, so it's conceivable that even if we get the win over Everton in a few days, and hopefully we will do that, still could end up being behind Manchester United in the standings in about a week, week and a half if we lose the game on the road against them. So as I think about the transfer window, definitely should have been more aggressive with a player that I liked available on a free like Rabiot. Positively, even though we're not really going to end up with anybody substantive in this transfer window, I think the tips that some of you have given me on revising my scouting and recruitment have been helpful. Starting to see a lot more interesting scouting reports coming back on potential players who could help us now, and probably even more importantly, potential wonder kids for the future. So my hope is that the main transfer window over the summer ends up being significantly more productive for us than this one was. One last thing to mention on transfers before we start moving forward towards our game with Everton is that we have not received any offers on Thiago Silva, and then Ben Chilwell on our team had also received an offer from a Saudi team. We had agreed with him that if the offer came in about $20 million more than what they were offering, we would let him go. But there hasn't been any progress and any demand for either Chilwell at the levels that we were looking for, or Silva, who is going to be available on a free this coming off season. Silva's still completely unwilling to negotiate a contract with us. I think that's fine. 39 years old. His skills are starting to deteriorate a bit. He's been an important player for us this year, but feel like we've got enough good young center defenders that we don't need to bring him back next year. So I honestly wouldn't have minded if Arsenal or someone else had come back and said, hey, we'll give you $5 million for him. But was not to be the case. He'll likely be leaving on a free this offseason, and it seems like interest in Chilwell has chilled, for lack of a better expression. If we had been able to sell Chilwell for $80-90 million, that certainly would have opened up an entirely different caliber of player that we could have looked at in the transfer market this January. But unfortunately, that did not happen. And as we get ready for the match with Everton, part of the reason that we're kind of okay moving on from Silva is that Wesley Fofana continues to recover from his damaged cruciate ligament. I think that he's going to be a big-time defender for us in the not-so-distant future. Unfortunately, he's basically going to miss this entire season. Looks like he's 8 weeks to 3 months away. So it's not inconceivable. He could get some playing time for us right at the end of the season, which would be great. But with a player like him coming back and the fact that he's more than 15 years younger than Silva, that makes us a little more comfortable moving on from Silva, since we haven't had Fofana at all this year. Although we're favored against Everton, Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo both away on international duty. So 2 pretty important players that we won't have in the lineup this time around. And as we get ready to face Everton, looks like they just made a coaching change. Victor Pereira, the club's new head coach. Hopefully they won't get off to a very strong start with him in charge. And we're ready to get going in this match against Everton. Hopefully we can get out of here with 3 points. As we've noted, they are near the bottom of the Premier League table, and we've got some tough matches coming up soon. So hopefully we can get the 3 points today, since it's probably going to be more difficult for us to get 3 points in the future. And looks like we may have an opportunity here right at the start of the game. Madueke puts one into the goal less than a minute into the game, so a great start here for Chelsea. Hopefully we can keep the momentum going. And unfortunately for us, Everton came back very quickly with an equalizer. Calvert-Lewin on the breakaway easily put it past our goalie, and the game is tied 1-1 already, even though we're less than 5 minutes into the game with the scoring. And we made it to halftime, still knotted up 1-1, pretty close in terms of expected goals. We're doing all right in the time of possession, in control, but would expect us to have been a little more dominant. So going to probably have to lay into these guys a bit at halftime and hopefully get a more positive performance in the second half of this game. And we're still knotted 1-1, 66 minutes into the game, so we've got a bunch of changes coming. We're actually going to bring in some of our more experienced players that we were hoping that might get the game off. But Nicholas Jackson in particular, who has been on international duty much of the month, is going to be coming in for Nanto to hopefully give us a spark and let us get that second goal that we really need at this point. And unfortunately, we ended up with a disappointing draw. We did play much better in the second half, got a lot of opportunities. You can see we took the big lead in terms of expected goals, and we really held Everton down in the second half in terms of their opportunities. Unfortunately, when all was said and done, all of the scoring was in the first 5 minutes of the game, and we end up with only 1 point in a draw here against a team that we certainly feel we should have gotten 3 against. And while we're not going to do anything in these final moments of the transfer window, Marc Cucurella has come to us. Newcastle has tried to get things unsettled with him by making an offer for him. He said he wanted to go. They offered about $35 million for him. Had a conversation with him to try to convince him to stay. He said he wants to be playing in the UEFA Champions League. Tried to convince him that if he sticks around with us, we'll probably be able to do that. But he wants to leave. Actually, the total amount was $30.5 million. So I did let him know, hey, we'll let you leave if they pay enough. But right now they're not in the right neighborhood. Threw a $50 million figure out there, which is materially higher than what they've offered for him. We will see what Newcastle thinks of that. And they've withdrawn the offer, unwilling to pay $50 million for him. So Cucurella will remain with us for the foreseeable future, most likely. And a relatively quiet transfer window for Chelsea, and quite honestly, not an incredibly busy transfer window overall, is now complete. Nothing materially happened for us. We kind of talked about some of the offers we made at the beginning of the episode. I think hopefully there's some lessons learned that will set us up better for the summer transfer window coming up. And as I mentioned, I feel that our scouting is in a good position to hopefully help us really capitalize on things. So we'll continue to talk with our players. We've got a big match coming up in a few days against Man United. And then we'll be back to a more normal pace of playing every week in the coming month of February after a relatively quiet month of January. So until our next episode, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.